Do my eyes deceive me? This is an emergency charge on podcast. What do we have to possibly talk about? Well, the big boom that happened at 9 p.m. yesterday. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, as always, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker and unwind with over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. We said it last week. We said that we're going to be starting to go to 2 episodes a week at the end of the month. Well, this week you're getting 2 episodes this week. You'll be getting an episode on Friday, as usual. But last night at 9 p.m., and listen, I will say, I debated making an emergency pod. I debated it. I debated making an extra episode because I'm like, can I really talk? I said, my thing is, will I make a podcast if I can't talk about something for at least 15 minutes? So I'm like, can I really talk about Jayvan Boggs for 15 minutes? And I came to the realization, I'm like, I could probably do that. So, last night at around 9 p.m., oh, no Nick, just me. Just going to be a quick little emergency podcast for those that are pumped about last night. We're going to get into second week of fall camp and all that coming up on Friday's show. We have a lot to get to. A lot that I have been noticing in the sound bites. I was at practice. I was at practice today, or I wasn't at practice. I went to post-media availability practice today. And the last couple of days, we've been hearing some very interesting sound bites. So we'll be getting to that on Friday's show. It's going to be a big one. Nick will be back. But let's get to the reason we're all here. Jayvan Boggs. Now, got to take you back. It's like at the beginning of Deadpool. Got to take you back to a couple months ago. You could go way further back to maybe a year ago. Jayvan Boggs committed to Ohio State. Now, I think you can make the assumption that when he committed to Ohio State, a lot of the times in today's age of the transfer portal, or not transfer portal, but recruiting in general, right? When a guy commits, you hold your breath, especially that early on. Like, that's why I was so nervous about Tavion Swin, because I'm like, he committed so early in the process. Can UCF really make it to the finish line? And it looks like they are. But Jayvan Boggs committed to Ohio State. And then he decommitted. Let me see if I can pull up the date here. So he committed October 9th of 2023. So not a year ago, but a good amount of time ago. He committed on October 9th. He then decommitted March 26th. So he was only committed to them for about 5 to 6 months. And when he decommitted, and there was a couple factors that you were like, oh, UCF's going to be in the running. He plays in Cocoa. His coach was a former UCF player. There's so many things that were working in UCF's factor for Jayvan Boggs. And listen, I talked about it on this show. I think in terms of receiver, you can make the argument Waden Charles is the best receiver UCF signed. And UCF's got a lot of great wide receivers, especially in this class. I mean, if we look at the list of receivers that UCF has signed this class, or hasn't signed yet, but has committed to this class, and we'll see if anything changes. We'll see. But as of right now, you have Jayvan Boggs, Waden Charles. You've got Santonio Isaac from Tampa, Carl Jenkins Jr. You've got 4 wide receivers that on many people's boards would be number 1. And that's not me being a homer. That's just me being truthful. I mean, plain and simple. When UCF had Jayvan Boggs for a visit, I had heard from multiple people that he was almost a lock to UCF. Almost a lock. As close as a lock as you can get, basically. Now, I have heard some of the reasons why he maybe chose to go to Missouri. I think one of the big underlying reasons was the quarterback situation heading into the years ahead. Malik Washington was a name that we continuously talked about on this show as a name that UCF had circled and UCF was going after. He came to Bounce House Weekend, and I think there was a good rapport there. I think a lot of people and a lot of players saw Malik Washington, one of the top quarterbacks in the 2025 class. Jayvan Boggs clearly created a connection with him, thought that they were going to go to UCF together. And I think when Malik Washington decided to stay home in Maryland, there was maybe a little bit of a shift there. And that's, I think, and listen, call it like it is. Missouri definitely offered more money than UCF. You can assume that Missouri offered more money. It's an SEC school. Just like John Walker was on a podcast this past week, and he said, yeah, Florida offered more money. I still chose to go to UCF. So there is that factor into it. Maybe he wanted the more money at the time. The quarterback situation at UCF, it's a toss-up. We talk about it on this show all the time. The quarterback situation at UCF is going to be a toss-up heading into next year. Now, we'll talk on Friday's show why that might not be the case anymore, but we'll talk about it on Friday's show. But I'm sure those factors really played into the decision for Jayvan to go and commit to Missouri. Well, last night, everybody was taken off guard. And I mean everybody. I was talking to Stephen Leonard today, and he was just as shocked. And he's like the one guy you don't expect to be shocked about certain things like that. He always knows what's happening. He always has a pulse on what's going to happen in the coming weeks or days. He's like, yeah, I was completely shocked. I did not expect that. So it caught all of us by surprise. I made a little typing error on my tweet, on my last line. Thank you to those who mentioned that, where I said 2026. If you are a fan of this podcast, you know I have been mentioning Jayvan Boggs for at least the past 7 months when it comes to this class. In my opinion, he is a top 5 receiver in this class. He might not be ranked that way, but in my opinion, he is that good. He is that good. And I always implore you guys that whenever UCF gets a commitment, to just turn on the tape. Because the tape never lies. Now, with high school kids, it could lie. Right? Sometimes it could. Because if you're playing in a really weak division class in high school, maybe it just looks better than it is. But most of the time, a majority of the time, the tape doesn't lie. With Jayvan Boggs, all you have to do is turn on the tape. Yes, he is 6 foot, right? Most receivers are. It doesn't matter your size. And he's not the highest ranked receiver, right? If you go on 247's composite, he's the 23rd ranked wide receiver. According to 247 Sports in general, he's ranked the 45th best receiver. Now, he is a top 247. He's 211th nationally, according to the 247 composite. If you go look at his stats, it's literally insane. Now, from last year specifically. Last year was his breakout year. Now, he does have one of the top quarterbacks in the class throwing to him in 2026, Brady Hart. He does have him throwing to him, so that might help. But last year, he had 93 receptions for, let's just say, 1,500 yards. He had 1,493, so 1,500 yards and 23 receiving touchdowns. Andrew Ivins of 247 wrote, a thick, cut wide receiver that racks up chunks of yards after the catch, assembled a historic junior campaign totaling just under 1,500 receiving yards and 23 touchdowns for Florida's 2M champs, displays suddenness as a route runner, and will set defensive backs up with dynamic cuts and slick head fakes as he attacks leverage. Quick to locate the football and has proven to be rather sure-handed, makes his money working the smaller numbers of route trees as he makes it extremely difficult for would-be tacklers to get him on the ground with his advanced vision and impressive contact balance. More of a build speed prospect at this stage, but he still finds ways to make an impact and gets into the end zone. Should be viewed as a potential zone coverage beater that can handle a high volume of targets in an offense that features West Coast concepts. Has multi-year power 4-starter upside and could work his rotation sooner rather than later as he doesn't lack polish. Let me tell you something. This one got me hyped. And it didn't just get me hyped because I'm a huge Jayvan Boggs fan. I've wanted him to be on UCF since we started recruiting 2025. And as you know, you don't recruit 2025 in the year. You start recruiting years before. When Josh Heupel was here, the hometown hero thing wasn't a thing. He didn't recruit Florida well. He didn't recruit the local area practically at all. Gus Malzahn came in and changed that. And to get... We talk about it so much on the show, so I'm sorry if this is just repeating myself over and over again. But to get some of the top players that could go to SEC, Big Ten schools if they wanted, and they choose to stay home, that's huge. Now, I think if one of the reasons why Jayvan Boggs might have been a little weary about committing to UCF, I think there's a couple names that maybe were big reasons why he flipped back. Because I think ultimately, he wanted to be a Knight. Like, Missouri fans can say whatever they want. Jayvan Boggs wanted to be a UCF Knight. But at the end of the day, you have to make a decision that's best for yourself. I had no fault in Boggs committing to Maryland. I was upset because I think that'd be a really good addition for UCF's receiving room. Next year, you're really going to have a lot of question marks. I mean, Kobe's gone. Xavier Townsend, depending on his year, could be gone. But many expect Xavier to be, wide receiver 1 next year. You've got a lot of question marks in the receiver room. You have a lot of guys that can be really good, but who's going to step up and take that, mantle? Burdell Richardson clearly seems like a guy that could potentially be really good for UCF for years to come. But who is on the come up? And I think you look at Boggs and you're like, he could easily be a guy. But you can't fault him for making a decision like that. I never fault guys to make decisions. You can be hurt, but you never fault them. And that's why I don't like college football fans sometimes, because 30-something, 40-something, 50-something-year-old guys are talking down to college kids who are just trying to make a decision best for themselves. And people want to blame NIL, and people want to blame all this. At the end of the day, I think NIL is a factor, but it's not the factor. I think they did a poll to a bunch of players about how important NIL is. And it's a factor, but it's not the underlying factor when people are making that decision. Now, it might be for some, but I think for most it's not. So I think Jayvan Boggs always wanted to be a Knight. He always wanted to commit to UCF, but clearly outlying factors like potential quarterbacks were maybe something that he was not as comfortable with. Maybe it could have been playing time. I don't know. I don't know the exact reasoning. But I think when you look and you see, Jakari Brown clearly is making a name for himself in camp and showing out, which we'll talk about on Friday. Landon Duckworth, an upcoming player in the 2026 class, a top 10 quarterback in the class, probably committed to UCF. I think those factors, along and couple that with the fact that he wanted to commit to UCF anyway, means that today, August 7th, Jayvan Boggs has committed to UCF. Now, again, you always have to throw that out of who knows if it'll stick. I personally don't think it's going to change. I think it's going to stay. He's going to be committed to UCF. Third time's the charm. It always is that way. Third time's the charm. But for the staff to get it and for him to commit is huge for the class. They're now ranked 22nd on 247. They're ranked in the top 15 on Rivals. And who knows who else they can get in the next couple months. So, a gigantic boom, one that was totally unexpected, one that nobody saw coming. I didn't see coming. Nobody that I talked to saw it coming. And it just brings more excitement. The season is so close, and to start getting even more commitments like that is absolutely huge. Who knows who could be next? All right, that's going to do it for this emergency charge on pod, whatever you want to call it. Very exciting day yesterday. But tune in on Friday. Because there's a lot to talk about. I said it at the beginning, there is a lot to discuss on this week's episode of Charge On. We are getting back in a swing of things. We have a lot of exciting announcements coming up. I'm so excited to announce all of it. I have a big time announcement on Friday that goes into the next week. So, again, if you're not subscribed already, what are you doing? Please subscribe, like, share, comment, do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter. Again, been posting a lot more in there. Going to be covering the team in person this year, so really pumped about that. So if you want all your UCF coverage, be sure to follow me and so many other UCF people like Steven Leonard, Brandon Hellwig, Trey Strelko, so many great guys that you can follow. But definitely follow me if you're a fan of the pod and want to stay up to date with all of that. All right, everybody, this has been Charge On presented by BetOnline. We will see you this week on Friday.